Now, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, that's the DRC, is in the grip of a humanitarian crisis. The country currently has the highest number of people dealing with food insecurity worldwide. The United Nations World Food Programme has ramped up assistance to reach 3.6 million people during the next 6 months. Tomson Phiri from the United Nations World Food Programme joins us now for more on this. Tomson, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time. I mean, it's pretty much like sometimes we forget there's a humanitarian crisis in the eastern part of the DRC, but a number of major happenings there, besides the conflict, has been making things very much tough. How big is the humanitarian crisis now?
Oh, it's close to a catastrophe. It's no longer a question of if we are going to have a humanitarian catastrophe. It's rather a question of when. I was recently in the DRC. The way people are living in the East, I was battling tears throughout my trip in Beni, in Bunia, in Goma. People are overcrowded. They have been forced out of their homes. They've been driven from their lands. They are now squatting, literally squatting in makeshift camps. Everything is makeshift. Protection issues are on the rise. When women leave the camps to go out either to search for firewood, they are at risk of attacks. They are at risk of rapes. And as I speak to you now, people are barely surviving. The situation is desperate. People are scrounging around for food.
How close are we then to a humanitarian catastrophe in the eastern DRC?
Every ingredient of a humanitarian catastrophe is in the east of Democratic Republic of the Congo. You do have conflict. You do have limited access for humanitarian actors to move around. You do have a raging climate crisis. You do have armed groups that are operating throughout the area. And I'm afraid by the time we start to call it a humanitarian catastrophe, it may be too late.
So is the biggest cause still the war, or are there other main factors?
The DRC requires investment in every facet of life. The conflict is the biggest driver. Insecurity as well. There is massive infrastructure deficit. For example, a distance of 241 kilometers between the capital of the East, Goma, and Beni, which normally takes us on a very good day 4 days by road to deliver food, is taking us up to 3-4 months just to get food to people over a stretch of 240 kilometers. We have to go through neighboring countries just to reach those people. So this is a country that is yearning for investment. But above all and above everything else, this is a country that is yearning for peace.
Yeah, and you've got a fragile humanitarian situation, as you say, which is bordering on a catastrophe worsened by the climate crisis. I understand some 400 people were killed recently during flooding.
Indeed, when it rains, it pours in the DRC, unfortunately, both literally and metaphorically. Just a month ago, we had massive landslides with massive flooding in a place called Kahele that killed 400 people, really. And you realize that you now have a conflict that is now clashing with the climate crisis in Southern Africa. It really, they cannot even catch a breath.
Yeah. Now, as the World Food Programme, I see you are calling for a scaling up of humanitarian assistance to the eastern DRC. What does that look like? I mean, when you say scaling up, because you've got about, I understand, 5.7 million people who've been displaced since March 2022 in North Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri.
This is a desperate measure. Desperate times call really for desperate measures. What we have done now is that we have enacted what we call a corporate scale-up. In fact, the entire United Nations system has now activated what we call a system-wide activation. This is the highest form of alert. This we do so that we're able to ramp up assistance in a very short space of time, so that we all can scale up, we all can work together and try to come up with a solution in the DRC. But the problem in the DRC, in as much as we have ramped up, in as much as we've activated this system-wide activation, it is also a problem of being out of the media's glare. I mean, when you talk to Congolese people, when I was there, I asked them, what do you think about the East Africa? What do you think about the eastern part of the country? They're all tired, but so is the rest of the world.
So it's like a forgotten crisis, which is a tragedy that the humanitarian catastrophe is allowed to develop there, and we don't even talk about it in the media, as you say. It doesn't make headlines anymore. It's a tragedy. But your scale up, your corporate scale up, I understand, you'll be targeting to reach 3.6 million vulnerable people in the eastern DRC during the next 6 months. Will that be sufficient?
Humanitarian assistance is never sufficient, Dan, unfortunately. What we are doing now is to target the most vulnerable, the poor of the poor, at least this 3.6 million who are living at least in the East. DRC, as you know, is continental in size. Approximately 25.8 million people are hungry today. But what we are saying is that we are going to concentrate on the East for now. Whilst we are helping the rest of the country, we want to make sure that these 3.6 million people that are at risk, at least we're able to arrest the situation and lift them up. Otherwise, their situation might actually worsen if nothing is done.
And that will be disastrous. You know, it's very ironic and sad at the same time that DRC is a country that produces the most precious metal in making the latest technologies, has the highest number of food insecure people in the world. And then the eastern part of the DRC is mired in this conflict that seems to be worsening. What's your final appeal to the rest of the world as the World Food Programme, Tomson?
Well, when you look at the DRC, and rightly as you say, it is a country that is endowed with resources. You literally just have to throw your seed into the ground, and you no need for fertilizers or other inputs, you will harvest. It is blessed with rains, it is blessed with good soils, it is just about everything. It is actually sad. Our appeal to the world at this point in time is to help us get money. We need money in the DRC. We are appealing. Our budget is about 870 million for the next 6 months. We only have less than 15% of that amount. We are short of 759 million. We need money, and we need it now.
Thank you very much, Tomson Phiri. A very heartfelt appeal there from the United Nations World Food Programme for support for the people of the Eastern DRC. He says it's very close to a humanitarian catastrophe. It's no longer a question of if, but it's a question of when that will take place.